Sirens clawed through the glass tower as screens vomited headlines about falsified earnings. And the narrator said, Ethan Cole said, "Lock the room." He stared at the red crawl like it could be bargained with. Laura Price said, "Crisis. Team is on 12. Dana Mercer said, "We can contain it if the board stays quiet." The narrator watched Ethan's jaw set, the old gladiator mask sliding on. Ethan Cole said, "No leaks, no apologies." Phones jittered like trapped insects while traders howled below. Victor Hale smiled from a live feed, a shark scenting blood. Dana Mercer said, "Our cash window is 30 hours, maybe less." The narrator felt alliances thin like ice over black water. Laura Price said, "Employees need truth, not theater." Ethan Cole said, "They need work." Fire alarms tested the air, or maybe fear did. A single number on the screen slipped from red to abyss, and the narrator knew the empire had started to fall. Morning crept in like a bill collector, and the narrator watched Ethan Cole count breaths as headlines called him a liar. Laura Price said, "We need a statement in 20. Ethan Cole said, "Silence buys time." Dana Mercer said, "Silence fuels panic." The office smelled of wet wool and neon fatigue. The narrator noticed a hairline crack in the window frame, thin as doubt. Victor Hale said, "Markets punish weakness through every pundit's mouth." Ethan Cole said, "Schedule the board, 11 sharp 20. Laura Price said, "Employees want answers now." The elevator chimed like a metronome of risk. Dana Mercer said, "Cash is bleeding." Ethan Cole said, "Let it remind them we are alive." The narrator felt the city lean in, hungry for a fall. Somewhere below, coffee lids snapped like small verdicts. The war room screen stitched a quilt of bad news, and the narrator saw morale thin like smoke. Laura Price said, "Tell the truth and we keep our people." Dana Mercer said, "Tell too much and we lose our lenders." Ethan Cole said, "We choose precision." A floor map showed red zones like bruises. The narrator felt the past tapping on the glass. Victor Hale said, "Consolidation is mercy," through a clipped analyst note. Ethan Cole said, "No mercy today." Phones brightened with union chatter and rumor threads. Laura Price said, "We stabilize payroll first." Dana Mercer said, "Vendors will howl if we don't." Ethan Cole said, "Let them howl." The narrator listened for courage and heard cost instead. A single printer jammed, flashing a stubborn red. Harold Kent arrived with rain on his hat brim, and the narrator watched time sit down beside him. Harold Kent said, "I once thought I was bigger than the market." Ethan Cole said, "The market thinks it is bigger than God." Harold Kent said, "It is bigger than pride." The conference room smelled of old leather and static. Laura Price said, "We can cut once, cleanly." Dana Mercer said, "Or bleed slowly, and lose both arms." Harold Kent said, "Pick the scar you can live with." The narrator saw Ethan weigh scars like coins. Ethan Cole said, "We cut where waste hides." Silence drew a map of pain across the table. Harold Kent said, "Apologize with action, not words." The elevator chimed again, tallying ghosts. The town hall streamed to 1,000 desks, and the narrator felt the building hold its breath. Ethan Cole said, "We are not dead, we are disciplined." Nina Brooks said, "Are we safe or expendable?" Ethan Cole said, "No one is expendable, but nothing is untouchable." Laura Price said, "We keep salaries current and cut perks." Dana Mercer said, "Vendors renegotiate today." The chat scrolled like rain on glass. Ethan Cole said, "Integrity is a balance sheet item now." The narrator counted the seconds between hope and doubt. Nina Brooks said, "Say what you knew, and when." Ethan Cole said, "You deserve that, and you will get it." Cameras blinked, recording every tremor. The stream ended, but the hush did not. The boardroom gathered like a jury, and the narrator felt the carpet hush every step. Laura Price said, We need a consent agenda to keep pace. Dana Mercer said, we need truth before consent. Ethan Cole said, we need control. A wall of filings glared in neat stacks. Harold Kent said, power hates a vacuum, fill it or get consumed. The rain paused, leaving the windows smeared with city salt. Victor Hale drifted across a muted screen like a storm front. Ethan Cole said, no resignations, not today. Laura Price said, 3 directors want a separate session. Dana Mercer said, they fear liability more than collapse. The narrator watched a signature line wait like a trap. Ethan Cole said, table the audit review for 48 hours. Harold Kent said, delay earns interest on doubt. The clock ticked a dry metronome, and the narrator counted how fast faith depreciates. The separate session met without invitation, and the narrator stood outside with the ache of excluded air. Laura Price said, I will keep minutes whether they want them or not. Ethan Cole said, let them circle. I will choose the battlefield. Dana Mercer said, legal wants documented disclosure paths. The hallway hum was a machine learning disappointment. Harold Kent said, when they shut doors, they plan exits. The narrator watched red indicator lights glow like coals. A muffled voice inside said, interim leadership options. Ethan Cole said, interim is a word for scavengers. Laura Price said, we still need 3 votes. Dana Mercer said, we can bargain with timing and covenants. The narrator felt the building tilt toward gravity. Ethan Cole said, then we move the center of mass. Numbers bled on the lender call, and the narrator traced each basis point like a cut. Dana Mercer said, we need a 90-day bridge with step-down triggers. Ethan Cole said, we trade assets, not time. A banker said, time is the only asset you lack. Laura Price said, payroll must clear Friday or trust dies. The line crackled like a lie detector. Victor Hale's fund name appeared as a silent observer. Ethan Cole said, we will post inventory and receivables. Dana Mercer said, and tighten capex to bone. The banker said, board affirmations by tomorrow. The narrator pictured signatures tightening into handcuffs. Ethan Cole said, you will have them. Silence weighed the promise and found it light. The call clicked off and the room did not exhale. The internal memo leaked before approval, and the narrator felt heat rise from keyboards like asphalt. Nina Brooks said, they just cut the wellness fund. Ethan Cole said, we preserved jobs. A chat reply said, you preserved yours. Laura Price said, we need a floor walk, face to face. Dana Mercer said, we secure the network and trace the source. Owen Reed said, traffic spike near the server room. The elevator chimed like a smirk. Ethan Cole said, I will answer in person. Nina Brooks said, then answer without spin. The narrator watched heads lift above cubicle walls like prairie grass in wind. Harold Kent said, respect is not a dividend, it is a deposit. The hush felt heavier than alarm bells. Night swallowed the tower again, and the narrator tasted metal in the air. Celeste Ward said, you are negotiating with gravity. Ethan Cole said, then I will change the mass. Celeste Ward said, I prefer to buy falling objects. The penthouse windows framed a jeweled city. Dana Mercer said her capital ends the bleed, but she will want a pound of the company. Laura Price said, she will want a soul, not a pound. Celeste Ward said, control is a vocabulary word. Ethan Cole said, define it. She smiled like a closed door. The narrator knew this was the price of breath. Harold Kent said, beware money that waits in the dark. Ethan Cole said, I have lived in darker rooms. The room held its verdict in crystal glass. Night pressed against the tower like a secret, and the narrator watched Owen Reed unlock a terminal with hands that didn't tremble. Owen Reed said, one more pull, and I'm gone. A hidden chat pinged like sonar. Victor Hale said, deliver the vendor list and the leverage follows. Owen Reed said, you get the timing, not the keys. The cursor slid across a vault of contracts, quiet as a wire. Ethan Cole paced 2 floors above, unaware of the breach blooming below. Laura Price said, security wants a recap in the morning. Owen Reed said, they'll get a story, not the truth. The narrator felt the building listen, ducts and cables carrying whispers. A drive light blinked green, then red, then steady, and the night swallowed the color. Dawn bruised the skyline, and the narrator watched Victor Hale greet it like a partner. Victor Hale said, we move at open and force their board to blink. An analyst said, leak points to covenant breach. Victor Hale said, then we become the cure. Screens mapped Ethan Cole's empire like a patient on a table. Victor Hale said, short, then offer a lifeline. The plan felt surgical and cold. A silent window showed rain receding from the river. Victor Hale said, fear is momentum in disguise. The narrator heard the smile in his voice. Somewhere, orders queued like planes on a runway, and the sun found no warmth in the room. Laura Price arrived early, and the narrator saw suspicion follow her like a shadow. Laura Price said, audit trails don't lie, people do. She traced last night's traffic with a pen that tapped in war rhythm. Dana Mercer said, we need culprits, not theater. Laura Price said, we need patterns, then names. She flagged a cluster near the server core, like a bruise under glass. Ethan Cole said, tell me if we are compromised. Laura Price said, we are watched, not broken. A printer coughed a sheet that felt heavier than paper. The narrator noted the timestamp like a wound that still bled. Celeste Ward stood at the edge of a private gallery, and the narrator felt money weigh the air. Celeste Ward said, you're buying time, Ethan, not absolution. Ethan Cole said, time prices options. Celeste Ward said, options price control. Frames of abstract steel caught the morning like knives. Dana Mercer said, her turn sheet saves the company and sets the collar. Celeste Ward said, control votes now, narratives later. Ethan Cole said, then write it with me. Her eyes measured cost, not courage. The narrator understood that capital speaks in verbs, not promises, and the pen waited like a blade. Evening fell like a verdict, and the narrator watched Owen Reed hand a file to a courier who never gave his name. Owen Reed said, last drop, then silence. The courier nodded like a metronome. Victor Hale said, tomorrow we take their breath and sell it back. Laura Price said, someone is ahead of us, I can feel it. Ethan Cole said, then we get ahead of ourselves. A siren somewhere argued with the wind. Dana Mercer said, the lenders want signatures by 9. The narrator felt 2 clocks ticking, one public and one in the walls. The courier vanished into traffic, and the night learned a new route. The trading bell rang like a hammer on bone, and the narrator saw Ethan Cole absorb the blow with a face carved from stone. Laura Price said they dumped half our stock in 90 seconds. Dana Mercer said, the lenders will pull covenants tonight. Ethan Cole said, then we give them reason to wait. Screens flickered with red cascades that looked like fire-eating maps. Harold Kent said, this is the chapter where the hero admits he is broke. Ethan Cole said, I am not broke, I am under siege. A silence spread across the room, like smoke curling under a door. Nina Brooks said, the employees are calling this theft, not market correction. Ethan Cole said, they will learn markets have no moral vocabulary. The narrator felt the empire's foundations sway like steel under earthquake stress. The boardroom reeked of fear masked by perfume, and the narrator watched Dana Mercer slip a sealed folder onto the table. Dana Mercer said, this came from compliance, names tied to the breach. Ethan Cole said, whose hands? Dana Mercer said, yours or those you trust. Laura Price said, this is an ambush, not a finding. Harold Kent said, ambushes still draw blood. Ethan Cole said, then, I bleed forward. A director's voice whispered from the corner, "We cannot stand with liabilities." The narrator saw the folder sit unopened, heavier than the marble table itself. The corridors hummed with the sound of retreat, and the narrator marked every ally by their absence. Laura Price said, "Two directors just cancelled tomorrow's vote." Dana Mercer said, "Our legal counsel won't sign the next disclosure." Ethan Cole said, "Let them run. I'll walk through the ashes." Harold Kent said, "Ashes don't negotiate contracts." Phones buzzed like gnats, each carrying withdrawal notices. Nina Brooks said, "If they go, we follow." Ethan Cole said, "If they go, we outlast." The air smelled of ozone, sharp and metallic, like storm before collapse. Beneath the noise, the narrator saw a spark rise where no one expected it. Nina Brooks said, "If they think we're weak, we prove we're not." Ethan Cole said, "Words don't balance sheets." Nina Brooks said, "But they rally people." Laura Price said, "She's right. Employees will listen to her." Dana Mercer said, "It risks exposing fractures." Harold Kent said, "Sometimes fracture is the only proof the structure stands." Nina Brooks said, "Give me the floor." Ethan Cole said, "You want the crowd, take it." The narrator felt a new vector form, subtle and sharp, cutting through the ruins. The narrator felt midnight press against the glass as Ethan Cole stood alone, city lights bleeding like wounds below. Ethan Cole said, "If betrayal comes, let it come from the front." The reflection showed two versions of him, one leader, one ghost. Laura Price said, "You can still negotiate with Hale." Ethan Cole said, "I would rather fall than bow." Dana Mercer said, "You may do both." Silence folded over the room like velvet. Harold Kent said, "The fall is always closer than you think." Ethan Cole said, "Then I'll strike while falling." The narrator held its breath with him, and the storm outside answered. The narrator watched the underdog rise where no spotlight had ever lingered. Nina Brooks said, "If they want collapse, we give them defiance." Ethan Cole said, "Defiance without numbers is theater." Nina Brooks said, "Numbers follow voices." Laura Price said, her voice cuts through the noise. Dana Mercer said, "It could also ignite revolt." Harold Kent said, "Revolt is sometimes the seed of renewal." The cafeteria buzzed with phones lifted like torches. Nina Brooks said, "We are the company, not the stock, not the market, us." The narrator felt the words stick like nails in wood, and for the first time silence bent toward hope instead of fear. By afternoon, the narrator felt the empire's scaffolding sag. Dana Mercer said, "Liquidity is gone by morning." Laura Price said, "Payroll posts today but nothing else clears." Ethan Cole said, "We strip assets to buy breath." Harold Kent said, "Every pawn you sell is a king you lose." Nina Brooks said, "Then stop selling and start building." Victor Hale said, "Markets don't fund sentiment across every feed." Ethan Cole said, "Then we weaponize sentiment." Screens lit with lender withdrawals, balances vanishing line by line. The narrator heard the empire groan like a ship tearing at its keel. The narrator followed whispers into a penthouse suite where betrayal tasted like champagne. Victor Hale said, "You carry the keys, Dana, not him." Dana Mercer said, "Keys open doors, but they also lock them." Victor Hale said, "I offer control, stability, and legacy." Dana Mercer said, "You offer my name carved in stone beside his ruin." Victor Hale smiled like glass underfoot. The narrator sensed Dana's hesitation crackle like dry tinder. Hale leaned close, whispering, "Empires reward those who turn the knife." The city beyond sparkled as if complicit. The narrator found Harold Kent in a quiet archive room, eyes tracing dust like it was memory. Harold Kent said, "I built an empire once and it devoured me." Ethan Cole said, "I'm not you." Harold Kent said, "Every empire eats the same." Laura Price said, "He still has moves left." Harold Kent said, Moves without faith are just rehearsals for collapse. Ethan Cole said, then I'll gamble faith itself. Nina Brooke said, faith has already chosen its champion. Silence thickened like parchment, heavy with old lessons, and the narrator realized the past was a warning wrapped as prophecy. The narrator held its breath as Ethan Cole stood before glass doors, war in his reflection. Ethan Cole said, tomorrow we confront the board, and tomorrow they learn I do not bend. Laura Price said, they will expect concessions. Ethan Cole said, they will receive conditions. Dana Mercer said, they have leverage. Ethan Cole said, leverage is only wait until someone lifts it. Nina Brooks said, then lift with us. Harold Kent said, lift too much and you tear yourself apart. Outside, the city stormed with sirens, and the narrator felt Act 6 coil like thunder waiting to strike. Morning cracked over the tower with surgical light, and the narrator watched the boardroom fill like a courtroom. Ethan Cole said, we convene to decide survival, not blame. Laura Price said, the agenda is tight, the time tighter. Dana Mercer said, lenders require signatures by noon. Harold Kent said, they require conviction, not ink. A director asked about insolvency, as if naming it made it tame. Victor Hale appeared on a wall of glass as an invited observer. Victor Hale said, I bring certainty where chaos feeds. The narrator felt every chair aligned toward the camera like iron to a magnet. Ethan Cole said, certainty costs a crown. Laura Price said, we vote measures, not thrones. The air tasted of copper and coffee, and the clock's second hand carved hope into smaller pieces. The narrator felt the room tilt when compliance logs hit the table like cold iron. Laura Price said, access spikes traced to after-hours polls. Ethan Cole said, name the path. Dana Mercer said, credentials routed through a proxy in the server corridor. Harold Kent said, a blade prefers a friend's sheath. Victor Hale said, leadership must cleanse itself to survive. A director asked, whose credentials? Laura Price said, an admin set, escalated by someone with treasury clearance. Eyes slid toward Dana like shadows, seeking a home. Dana Mercer said, I authorized nothing. The logs glowed with timestamps that matched a private lender call, and the narrator heard trust snap like a pencil in a quiet class. Doors swung, and the narrator saw Owen Reed enter with a face set to neutral. Owen Reed said, I can trace the proxy to a handset outside the server room. Ethan Cole said, whose handset? Owen Reed said, mine was cloned, then piggybacked. Victor Hale said, convenient. Laura Price said, prove chain of custody. Owen Reed slid a drive across the table like a confession he did not own. Dana Mercer said, technical theater delays consequence. Harold Kent said, truth is slow, but it arrives. The display filled with roots and pings, and a second handset appeared tied to a penthouse relay. The narrator watched eyes widen as the map drew a line from the core to a rival's light. The narrator felt pressure crest as Ethan Cole stood, pulling the room into his gravity. Ethan Cole said, we will not sell to a man who creates a wound, then bills for stitches. Victor Hale said, markets prefer surgeons to martyrs. Ethan Cole said, then meet a strategist. He produced Celeste Ward's term sheet like a drawn blade. Celeste Ward said on speaker, capital arrives with conditions, not apologies. Laura Price said her vote block stabilizes governance. Dana Mercer said her collar prices control. Harold Kent said, choose a leash you can breathe through. Ethan Cole said, this leash bites back. The narrator heard the board's doubt wobble as numbers aligned like planets at perilous distance. The vote rose like a tide, and the narrator counted hands that once shook with fear now hover with hunger. Victor Hale said, offer expires with your bravado. Ethan Cole said, so does your leverage. Laura Price said, motion to adopt ward financing and retain executive authority under crisis bill law. Dana Mercer said recorded objection. Harold Kent said, second. The tally crawled, then tipped, and the room exhaled like a lung saved in surgery. Victor Hale said, enjoy your oxygen while it lasts. Alarms on phones chimed with new headlines as shorts unwound an inch. Ethan Cole said, we are alive, not absolved. The narrator felt victory taste, metallic, bright and bitter, and knew the cost would collect later. The narrator felt silence ripple after the boardroom emptied, chairs left skewed like bodies after retreat. Ethan Cole said, we won, but victory feels like a loan. Laura Price said, liquidity flows again, but morale is broken. Dana Mercer said, vendors call this reprieve, not salvation. Harold Kent said, reprieve is a stay of execution, not pardon. Nina Brooks said, employees are calling me the reason they still stand. Ethan Cole said, then stand taller, they need a figure. The city lights trembled outside the window, blurred by fresh rain. The narrator knew the cost was victory hollowed by suspicion, weighty as stone in the lungs. The narrator followed Ethan Cole into his office, where triumph dissolved into cracks. Ethan Cole said, every brick I laid has teeth now. Laura Price said, you still hold the helm. Ethan Cole said, helms don't matter when the ship already sinks. Dana Mercer said, numbers stabilize, but legacy is bleeding. Harold Kent said, legacies always bleed when they're written in power. Ethan Cole said, then mine bleeds in ink and fire. His reflection fractured across the glass, half commander, half ghost. The storm outside hissed against the glass as if applauding a collapse. The narrator marked the fall of pride more brutal than the fall of numbers. The narrator watched a hush fall over the open floor as Nina Brooks stood where Ethan once commanded. Nina Brooks said, we are not shareholders, we are builders. Employees turned like flowers to the sun. Ethan Cole said, she carries what I squandered. Laura Price said, the staff believes her now. Dana Mercer said, belief is currency when cash is thin. Harold Kent said, the underdog becomes the spine of history. Nina Brooks said, we build forward or we break. The narrator felt a new axis shift, subtle but undeniable, where power transferred not with ink, but with voices choosing who to follow. The narrator shifted to a penthouse where unseen strings revealed their hand. Celeste Ward said, the board stands because I chose the floor. Victor Hale said, and yet I remain in play. Celeste Ward said, you lost the vote but planted the doubt. Victor Hale said, doubt compounds faster than interest. Celeste Ward swirled bourbon like it was the world. Ethan Cole said, you both carved me into collateral. Celeste Ward said, collateral is all any of us are. The narrator felt power pulse between shadows. An empire balanced on whispers and threats. The narrator ended with Ethan Cole alone in the dark, the city's pulse thrumming beneath him. Ethan Cole said, I won the war, but the empire died in my hands. He poured silence into a glass and did not drink. The storm cleared, leaving streets slick with neon. Nina Brooks said, echoing through memory, we are builders. Celeste Ward said, we are buyers. Victor Hale said, we are predators. Ethan Cole said, and I am a ghost of both. The narrator felt the final moment stretch, a stillness that hummed with aftermath. He pressed his hand against the cold glass, and the city did not answer.